We're your hosts,
Aaron Bacus
and Jason Kindler.
We like to sit down with our guests to hear their journey, their challenges, and how they impact the local community.
So grab a seat, tune in, and let's get inspired by Jacksonville's everyday workforce.
Welcome to Hometown Jacks. CJ, Bobola, I'm so happy to have you on the Hometown Jacks podcast.
Aaron.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, man.
You were
I
hard to
appreciate
get,
you,
man. I had to go through your agent. I mean, jeez.
I'm a pretty important guy, so I got a lot going on.
You are. And you've got a lot of hats that you've worn and you're wearing.
Yep.
And I can't wait to get into that. We love having our veterans on. We've had several veterans on, so thanks for your service. And I can't wait to dig into that. So adding to that, veteran, military police, loan officer, gun store owner. Is there anything that you're amazing at other than that list, or what?
Father, husband.
Father, husband. That's right.
You know.
And how many kids do you have?
We have 3.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that's great. Well, we'll add father and husband to that too.
There you go.
There you go. So I want to talk about kind of where you grew up, your history in the military, and kind of where we've gotten today. I think everybody out there is going to really enjoy hearing that. We love hearing from our veterans. And I want to talk guns. I'm very interested in that, and interested to hear what you have to say. So where'd you grow up?
So I actually grew up all over. My dad was in the Navy as well. So I come from a really big military family. My dad was Navy. His dad was Navy. My mom's dad was a Marine.
Wow.
My aunt was Air Force. My cousin was Army. My other cousin was Marine, and I was Navy. So
interesting.
I tell everybody our family has served in every branch but the Coast Guard, which isn't really a branch. So
that's pretty amazing. I mean, that kind of answers my next question. Is obviously you have a deep family history. Did you know kind of from when you were young you were going to do that? Like, was it even like not really an option, but like you knew that was going to happen?
No, I didn't really think too much, like coming down the stretch. I knew I wanted to be a police officer. And so I actually enrolled in college, started taking criminal justice courses. I walked in my first day to college, and the professor said that he was a police officer for 20 years, a lawyer for 10, and a judge for 5. And so his word was law.
Yeah.
And so I immediately failed out of all of his classes. And it did not go very well between me and him. We did not get along. And he was the only criminal justice teacher. So I flunked out of all of his classes. And my dad said, well, what are you going to do now? You know, you want to be a cop. You can't be a cop until you're 21. So what are you going to do for the next 3 years? And then he said, you can be a cop in the Navy right now. And I went, well, it looks like we're going into the Navy.
That's really interesting.
And so I just pivoted.
You don't really think about that because, you know, people going into the military are generally 18, 19 years old, a lot of cases. So you can really accomplish a lot being that young, going into the military on getting your goals.
Yeah,
moving.
several years ago, you actually had to be in the military for a certain period of time to be able to switch to the police officer rate, or in the Navy, the master at arms rate.
Right.
So you did have generally older people, but after 9/11, with the global war on terrorism, they really needed to expand the police force and the security forces. So then they opened it up and started letting 18-year-olds come straight into the military to be military police.
Interesting. That's super interesting. Well, you said your dad was Navy, right?
Yep.
So you didn't really have an option on which one you were choosing?
Yeah, I didn't put too much thought into it. I grew up outside of Camp Lejeune and outside of Mayport.
Uh-huh.
So I told everybody, like, my dad's family lived in Jacksonville. My mom's family lived in Jacksonville, North Carolina. So whenever we took a vacation, we were going to Jacksonville. It was just a question of which one and how far we were driving.
That's hilarious. Well, tell me a little bit. So you decide to go Navy, you enlist. Like, how does that work as far as I want to be an MP, or what is that what they call it in the Navy? MP?
Yeah, so in the Navy, it's a master at arms. I always just say military police because it's easier to understand. Not a lot of people know what a master at arms is, but it's military police for the Navy. And so you would go to a recruiter and you're going to tell them what job you want. And then each department kind of pitches you on what availability they have. When do you want to go, whether it's the summer or it's the winter, the timing, the calendar, and how much manpower they have plays a role into what positions they have available and what timing. So it was one of those things where, like, I couldn't leave in May. I had to wait till June. If I wanted that role. If I wanted to leave in May, then they would say, okay, well, we have these positions over, you can do these jobs. So,
So you really had a lot of choice, right? I mean,
well, based off of your ASVAB. So with the military, the first thing you do is you're going to go to MEPS. You're going to take the ASVAB and they give you a score. It's like the SAT, and they're going to give you scoring. And then each position, you have to score certain levels on that position of the ASVAB, right? So if you're going to be a mechanic, you have to score higher on the mechanic competency in order to be able to qualify to get in. So you take the ASVAB, and then that'll tell you which jobs you have available to you based on your scoring.
Is that an academic test only, not a physical test?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And is that just a Navy thing, or is that all the military forces?
I believe it's standard for all branches.
Okay.
You go, MEPS is usually the center that handles the test, and all the branches are there. And so then when you take it, you can go straight in and say, hey, I'm like just going Navy, and the Navy is the one that sends you. And so you're just kind of getting your reporting for them. But if you show up to just the general recruiting building, each branch has their own office, and they're all trying to talk to you and tell you why their branch is the best.
I'm sure. So tell us what it's like. Like, what did you do first? Like, where did you go first, and how your progression became to be military police?
Yeah, so the first thing, as far as the Navy's concerned, the first thing, and most branches are this way, you're going to go to basic training, and that's where they're going to strip everybody down to the basic level. They're going to make sure that you have all of the same training and qualifications. So no matter what your designation or what your job in the military is going to be, you're first going to go to basic training. And this is the classic kind of movie that you see. You're in a barracks, you're all sleeping in bunk beds. The drill sergeant comes in and yells at you and screams at you. It's anywhere from 6 weeks to 10 weeks, depending on which branch.
Okay.
For the Navy, at the time when I went, the only center that they had open for training is Great Lakes. So we get flown up to Great Lakes, went through training. It was 2 months long.
Okay.
Once you graduate from basic training, they then send you to your specialty school.
Okay.
In the Navy, we call it your A school.
Okay.
So then you go to that specific school, whether you're a police officer or you're medical or you're a corpsman or engineering, whatever the case is, you're going to go to then your A school. Depending on what specific job, you may then have to go to a C school, which is an additional training beyond that basic training of your job. So for instance, with military police, you would go to basic training, then you would go to A school in San Antonio, Texas, at an Air Force base, actually, and do your basic A school training to be a police officer, to learn how to be a police officer. Now that I know how to be a sailor, I then go learn how to be a police officer. And then they had C school training for if you were going to be a canine handler.
Okay.
If you were going to work with military working dogs. That was then an additional designation. You would then go to C school after you learned how to be a basic cop. Then you would go learn how to be a canine police officer.
So did you stop at military police and then went into your job? Now, what is the main function of an MP military police in the Navy? Like, what's your main job?
Yeah, the majority of the time you end up getting sent, the Navy does a sea to shore rotation. This is standard throughout all fields. You have to do a certain amount of sea time before you can pick orders to do something locally in the United States. And so my first designation was in Greece. Wow. A lot of the military police are basically security and police forces overseas on bases. So there's a lot in Bahrain, there's a lot in Greece and Rhoda, Spain, and Guam and Cuba. That's all ran by Navy Master at Arms. Because that's where they need the security forces. Then there's a couple of police officers on each boat to handle those things. And then there's a lot of shoreside police officers as well, obviously manning all the bases and all the gates.
Okay. So you're policing your own people in addition to a little bit of the outside world, depending on where you are? Is it kind of a combination of both?
Yeah, I mean, so your jurisdiction's generally just going to be on base, and you're not allowed to go beyond the base depending on your roles and stuff. Like if you're up in the Hampton Roads area, you're at Dam Neck, there are some smaller bases that you may have to drive to and in between. And then you have general kind of jurisdiction if you see something crazy happy when you're on the way from one place to the other, but you're not generally going to be policing civilians, depending on the base. There are some very rural bases where the military police do act as kind of local law enforcement because they give what would it be called?
Direction, rules, that sort of thing, or
it's I can't remember the legal term for it, but it's the precipice that basically we're going to allow you to arrest people in our city. Right. The local and county state will give them the authority to make arrests. And so there has to be that reciprocation between the two of whether you can or can't do stuff, because we are federal. And so then there's the state and local. So there are military bases where there aren't any even borders. And the general population do transit straight through the military base. So that would be a place where they need to have that jurisdiction worked out with the local and county of, okay, well, what are we going to do with civilians when they come on and one of our police officers, we have federal jurisdiction. So it can get really, really dynamic with how the different jurisdictions and the different branches within the law enforcement community have to kind of work together.
So are you kind of like internal affairs kind of thing? Like, are you military police? Are all the guys that aren't military police kind of like, whoa, the MP just walked in the room, watch what you say?
Right. I wouldn't say so much. If we walk in uniform in the bar, then everybody knows and everybody shuts down, right? Because
so that's a real thing.
Yeah,
like
everybody's
when you see Top Gun.
when you see them walk in, you're like, and a lot of times, just to make sure that our people are on their P's and Q's, a lot of commands will designate shore patrol whenever somebody's overseas, just to make sure they have some sober Americans policing the other Americans to make sure that, we don't want anybody to get locked up in country, because now it becomes a national media attention, and now they've got to kind of work through that. And the other country, the host country, doesn't have to release you back, right? You can go to jail overseas, on a liberty call when you got off to have some fun and you did something that you didn't even realize was against their customs or their laws, and now all of a sudden, you're getting locked up.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've all watched some form of movie, and I can just picture it right now, walking in the bar and the music stops and like, okay, it's time to get after it.
Yep, especially in multi-branch bases when you got Marines drinking together with Navy drinking with Army.
So do each of those have their own MPs?
It just depends on the base. Usually, if whatever the base is, whoever the host base is, their people are going to be the actual police. So if it's an Air Force base, they'll have SFs or security forces. If it's a Navy base, you'll have MAs. But generally, each command kind of helps try and run their own thing. So if there's a Marine command stationed on a Navy base, they're going to have kind of people that go out and try to help police their own, because it's usually a lot easier. It's very similar that you're all going to stick together, right? If there's a brawl at the baseball, right, everybody that's a Marine's a Marine, and they're all sticking together, and everybody that's Navy's Navy, even if I don't know you.
Right. So that's a real thing.
Oh yeah,
that rivalry. That's funny.
Yeah, Army Navy Day is fun every year.
Yeah. So how long were you doing this? How long were you MP?
So I did that for 5 years. My contract was for 5 years. I did 5 years of active duty, and then
I know you mentioned some, but mention some of the places you went to.
Yeah, I did. My first tour of duty was in Greece for a year as security forces, and then I did a mobile security unit out of Portsmouth, Virginia. And then with that unit, we actually did anti-terrorism pirate. So the Captain Phillips type stuff, we would board vessels that didn't have security forces. We would bring our guns on board, and then we would stand guard as they transited through South America or through Africa.
Really?
And so I did that for 4 years. We went on one cruise down through 6 or 7 countries in South America: Haiti, Antigua, Colombia, Cartagena. And that was over 4 months. And then I deployed to Rota, Spain for 9 months. And I was we would board boats in Spain and ride them down around Africa and protect them from piracy. So I went to 7 or 8 countries in Africa, in Gabon and the Republic of Congo and stuff. So after the 5 years of active duty, I pretty much seen most of the world. And
I
was
mean,
like,
it sounds like you got a pretty extensive resume. Were there instances where you had to fend off people trying to board a ship?
Not necessarily board a ship, but when they would start coming at you, you would either fire flares or warning shots, basically to try to increase the level of security,
right,
to give them the fair warning. So we didn't have any particular where they actually got to the boat and started climbing on. Generally, a lot of times they were smart, right? They'd see us with our guns up there and our camo.
Let's find another ship.
They'll go find another ship, right? So
that's funny. So 5 years of that, and man, what an interesting ride going to all those places. So where did you go after that? Where'd you end up?
Well, after that, I actually didn't do any police work. So I was like, hey, thank you so much for the time. I'm going to go be a cop like I wanted to. So I got out and joined the Virginia Beach Police Department.
Okay, awesome. So, and how long were you an officer there?
I was with them for 2 years, and then I was still in the reserves doing military police in the reserve unit, and had the time of my life. It was incredibly fun. I met some of the best people, friends to this day, and it was incredible. But at the time, the pay was $19 an hour, and my paycheck was $1,100.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't know if this is going to work out.
Yeah, right. What is harder, being military police or civilian police?
Civilian police. I mean, all day. Civilian police, it's more dynamic. It's more unknown.
Right.
Right. And you're dealing with generally, potentially some bad people.
Right.
The military police, even if you are acting as a police officer role, you're still most likely policing military people, who have a career and have stuff to lose and are very easy to track, and have some level of discipline. It's not to say that there's no crime that happens on base, but the ratio of crime from civilian to
That's a good point.
to military is much more drastic on the civilian side.
Have you ever had to draw your gun in an incident?
Several times.
Interesting.
Yeah. Never had to actually fire. Thankfully enough, but several times where something was going on, pulling on scene. Most of the time, bar fights that would turn violent, right? Like that's the difference in the military world. If people were getting out of line, generally there would be a bar fight, but everybody just throwing haymakers. And 9 times out of 10, if you heard over the radio that there was a fight at a bar, you knew it was going to turn deadly. Somebody was going to pull out a gun and start shooting. So that's where the level of crime, I would say, kind of really breaks apart from civilian to military.
Interesting. Wow, that's interesting. So 2 years in the Virginia Police. So what did you do after that?
That's when I was actually looking at either going back to law school and becoming a prosecutor, or I was having a fun time being a police officer. So I started looking at departments that paid more in Texas or Massachusetts and thinking about moving around. And then my cousin, Chris, was down here doing mortgages, and he was like, "Hey, I can get you a job doing that." And I said, "Man, I don't know what that is or how much it pays, but it gets me back to Florida, it gets me back to Jacksonville, where I wanted to be." I still have my GI Bill, so I figured I can go back to college if I don't like it. But yeah, let's fire it up.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. So obviously, going into where you are now as a gun store owner, we're going to get into, but I'm assuming being around a military family, you were around guns from day one. Is that right?
Yeah, my grandfather was an avid hunter for bird, and so we grew up hunting bird in North Carolina pretty much my whole life. So mostly just shotguns, never really pistols or rifles, but we did a lot of shotgun hunting. And that kind of was the first that piqued my interest. And of course, I'm always living either on a military base or near a military base. So you're watching the movies, you're living the culture. And then as I got older, that's when I started getting a little bit more into guns and wanting to learn more about different types of firearms. And then my best friend in high school was dead set on being a cop. And I was like, okay, yeah, maybe I'll, pursue that. Once I got to my first duty station in Greece, I was, eager to make a name, and they said, hey, based on your rank, if you become an armorer, that's really the tip of the spear. That's as high as you can go at your rank, because I was only an E1 at the time.
Okay.
They're like, we really don't let you progress any farther. And so I said, okay, well then I'm going to become an armor. And so I got that qualification and I got to that position, and now I'm in charge of the armory and all the guns and all the ammo and all the count. And so then when I went to my next duty station, they saw that I was already an armor. They went ahead and put me in that position. And so I just started doing more and more firearms instructing schools, armor classes, armor courses, and went further and further down that rabbit hole because of my position within the unit. And so that's what kind of originally drew me to that. I realized I was a pretty good shot pretty naturally, and I really loved teaching. And so whether it was disassembly and cleaning and maintenance or marksmanship and firearms instructing, all of it really just fit really well with me.
Interesting. So armor being you're in charge of all the arms on the base, essentially. They have to come check it out from you or something like that?
Correct, for my unit, which there is some legislation that's potentially being passed right now for military members to be able to carry on base, because we've seen so many things happen in the news where you're out defending your country, but you're not allowed to have any guns on base. So then on
you're
base,
not allowed to
you're
have any
sitting
guns
duck.
on base.
Yep.
Is that the same when you're overseas on a base? Really?
Yep. You have
That
to
is
check
something
them
I
out
don't think
at
a lot
the
of
armory.
people know.
Yeah, even if you live on base, you would have to check your arms into the armory, and then if you wanted to use them, you'd have to go check them out and go off base, use your firearms, and then go check them back in.
Yeah, that seems a little counterintuitive.
Yeah.
I mean, I could kind of understand both sides, but like we're entrusting our military people to do a lot of things. I think they can be trusted with having their firearm on them.
Yeah,
you know?
a lot of time it's just the military is a giant risk management metrics,
Right.
And so it was risk versus reward. The reward being that the soldiers and sailors can protect themselves on base. The risk being domestic disputes, right? The risk being any type of drunken dispute, any type of other potential crime, accidental discharges. I mean, and when the base commanders kind of look at that, and then the regional commanders, they look at that and say, okay, well, back then, what was the actual threat of, somebody shooting up a base with military members? It was very, very, very low.
Right.
And then what are the risks of domestic disputes turning violent or bar fights turning violent? Well, that's a little bit higher.
Right.
So do we really want to, to mitigate this one
point.
small risk? Do we want to increase the risk for all of these other things? And so it's just kind of always accepted that it's just like, hey, everybody gets checked coming on base. So if nobody has a gun, then we should be pretty fine. And then they've seen obviously how the hole in that defense, right, and the problems, and so that's why there's been a big push for letting soldiers and sailors be able to carry on base to protect themselves, because base police can only respond so quickly.
Fast. Yeah. What kind of firearm did you carry most of the time as a military police?
Military police at my time was the M9 Beretta 9mm. SIG won the contract a couple years ago, and pretty much everybody has switched over to the M17 or M18, which is the SIG P320.
Okay.
So that was pretty standard. The M11 was the P229. Was what most special warfare would carry, and then everybody carried either some type of M4 or M4A1, some type of M16
Got it.
variant, depending on which unit you were in.
And what about when you were regular police? What did you have?
In the Virginia Beach Police, we carried a Glock 17.
Okay.
And so Glock is the predominant
brand.
Yeah, brand of civilian law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Staccato's making a pretty good run, replacing a lot in Texas. That's where their manufacturing and facilities are, and so they've been branching out. But Glock's just been that tried and true for the longest time. They've had a pretty good stranglehold on civilian law enforcement.
Well, I can see where it's building up to you owning your own gun store. You sound like you're fully qualified at a young age. So let's go back to being a loan officer. You come back to Jacksonville. You start this loan officer thing. Were you just in a call center at that point, or?
Yeah, my cousin was working at a call center. They were mostly doing refinances on the service portfolio. Rates were still generally low at that time. This was 2015, 2016. In fact, while I was going through training was when TRID was introduced.
Oh, boy.
So I don't remember anything pre-TRID.
Right.
And people would, realtors would call me and say, hey, can I get a GFE? And I'm like,
what's that?
So I would show my age a little bit.
Well, as we know, being in the business, like that's probably a really good training ground to learn. Because you see a lot of volume and different things. So you learned there. So how long were you at that call center environment?
I was there for 2 years. Okay. And it taught me a lot of sales. It taught me a lot of mortgage. It taught me a lot of kind of turn and burn, right? Yeah. I learned my metrics. I learned my numbers. I learned how many calls I needed to make. I was able to kind of track that back and say, okay, if I made, 40 calls, it would equal this amount of applications. If I got this amount of applications, this many would go to processing. And I kind of nerded out over the numbers and knew, okay, if I do this, this, and this, I can kind of hit the targets that I want to hit. And that's why I tell a lot of people, like, it doesn't really matter how long you've been in the industry as much as how much you've been exposed to. And at what level you get exposed to it.
That's such a good statement.
Yeah.
That's so true. So did you go to the builder lender right after that?
I did.
Okay, that's where we knew each other.
Yep. Shortly after there, I actually went broker for 6 months because I decided that I knew it all and I was pretty much God's gift to mortgages. And so I went out, I struck out on my own, and for 6 months I did not get a single deal. And then I tucked my tail between my legs and I went to the open house at Jet and I said, hey, y'all got any of those mortgage things laying around that I can help out with?
We'll get back to the story in just a second, but while you're listening, here's something you should know if you live in Northeast Florida. If you're self-employed and trying to buy a home, it's not as hard as you might think. We work with business owners, freelancers, and creatives every single day. People who don't fit the traditional housing mold, and we're here to let you know that we have real loan programs that make homeownership possible. We've helped tons of local business owners and creatives get approved using flexible loan options that work for them and their business. First Coast Mortgage Funding is proud to sponsor Hometown Jacks right here in Jacksonville.
Well, again, another great learning opportunity for you because you're realizing how hard it is. Like the phone just doesn't ring like it does in the call center.
Nope.
And going to a builder lender, that gave you some great experience too. Learning that end of the business.
Yep.
We were just talking about it the other day about how, there is built-in business there, but there's extra levels of communication and priorities and things you have to do. So I'm assuming you learned quite a bit there.
Yeah, and my goal kind of going there was to build my book of business and build my brand. I realized that while I had something in the call center, right, all I had to do was sit down at 10 o'clock and the phones kicked on and I just had to smile and dial until I hit my numbers. Nobody locally knew who CJ was.
Right.
And so I was going to open houses and I was checking out events and I was meeting people and nobody knew who I was or trusted me, to send me their clients. And I said, all right, I got to do something. And so I knew that if I went to the builder, not only would they have potential business for me to work, but I would then have that brand. I'd have the local builder recognition. And so then I could start meeting people with that name and that imaging until they got to know CJ.
Well, you talk about building your brand. I mean, that is really key and smart. So obviously, let's talk about your brand. Your brand is military, helping the military. Is that right?
Yeah. So I started Heroic Mortgage a couple years ago. But before that, I was with Heroes First with Churchill Mortgage. Yeah. And when I left the builder, I just realized that helping military and police officers were kind of my people. Mm-hmm. I had a better time when they were my customers. I connected better with realtors who were prior military or law enforcement or firefighter. And I just felt that was the people that got me. And the relationship was easy.
Right.
And I didn't have to put on some hat and try to put on a show and be somebody that I wasn't in order to earn business. If I just was authentically me, and then the people that agreed with me would come up and identify with that and want to do business together.
Well,
so
you walked in their footsteps.
Yeah.
I mean, why would you not, if you've been in the military, want to work with somebody who's been in the military? They understand what you're going through.
Yeah, police officers, Firefighters are really, really good referral niches just because we work in a complex environment, and we tend to trust other people that have been in those shoes and seen those things. And it's same thing with the military. When you go to boot camp, you get stripped down to nothing, and you learn a bonding with your friends and with the people that are in that unit with you.
Yeah.
Same thing with the police department, fire department. The first thing they do is they strip you down, and they give you that camaraderie and that bonding. And then, night shift and different swings, understanding the job, nights, weekends, holidays, all of that comes along with it. That's something that, not everybody can relate to,
for sure.
And the struggles that go along with it. And so when you have somebody that's been there, it just puts you at ease a little bit. And so I realized that, hey, instead of trying to be everything to everyone, why don't I just try to be everything to the people that matter? And so I started the brand, and that's just always been our focus is, hey, let's help military, police, firefighter, medical teachers. Let's give back to them. Let's market to them. Let's serve them, and then have a better time and be more fulfilled serving that community than trying to serve everyone and be a, all you can eat buffet.
For sure. And that's worked out really well for you. And not to mention, you understand how their pay works, and
Yep.
you understand how to get them qualified. You
Yes.
understand deployments. You understand things along those lines. So that's great. And I'm assuming, though, you still had that itch while you're being a loan officer. It's like, hey, I loved being an MP. I love being a police officer. How am I going to do both? Is that correct?
Yeah, so I had a friend of mine that's still in the military, and we've remained very good friends. And so throughout this journey of being a loan officer, he's going through and he's getting ready to retire. And we had talked about opening up a range or opening up a gun store or what he was going to do when he gets out. And so I told him, hey, I'll make the money and figure out the business. You get as many qualifications as you can and get ready to run it. And then we'll come together and we'll start something together. And so then he had reached out to me and was like, hey, I'm about on my final duty station. We're about to retire. And I went, what do you mean? We're still so young. How are we about to retire when I just got out of the military like 3 or 4 years ago? And he's like, it's been 20 years. And I was like, oh,
okay.
Uh-huh. All right. So I was like, I should probably figure out this gun store thing then, if that was the plan. And so I started working with another partner, and he said, yeah, let's just fire it up and let's go for it. And I was like, okay. So I've got the mortgage stuff going, and I've had 3 kids in the past 6 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, let's throw in a gun store too. I'm not doing enough. Let's pile it on.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned qualifications, so I want to know what that means. But it's called Anchored Armory. It's 709 Bay Meadows Way, Suite 15 in Jacksonville.
Yes.
So let's talk about the qualifications. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so the more I started talking to realtors and being in my niche, I'd always introduce myself as prior military police and civilian police. I would then get people all the time that they just kept saying like, "Oh my God, I would love to go to the range. It's been so long since I've used my firearm, and I'm not really sure. I don't really know how to get back into it, or I've always been scared of guns." And they would always strike up conversations, and I would tell them, "Well, I used to be a firearms instructor, and I'm an armorer, so let's go to the range sometime." So then I started thinking, well, okay, how can I position that to help more people? And so I went to the NRA and I got some firearms instructing qualifications from them. And so now I said, okay, I can teach those to realtors. I can offer a gun safety course. I can offer firearms training in lieu of just the mortgage business. And now instead of being CJ, the mortgage guy that's trying to sell mortgages that does everything like everybody does, I can kind of help them with this other dynamic because there is a lot of safety concerns in the real estate space. You're meeting a complete stranger at a random location that you've never been to, that they've never been to, and you have no idea where the exits or egresses are and how to get out. So I figured, let me start teaching people some of those things, some of the police things that I learned in walking around buildings and what to look for and different things to, be aware of. So I started figuring out how to put together that kind of training package. And a bunch of my friends would say, oh, well, I need this or I need that. And I figured, well, if I'm going to already be teaching everybody firearms,
Why don't we sell
maybe
them
I
to
should sell them as well. Let's package the whole deal up. So I applied for my FFL. Got my space.
What is that?
The FFL is your federal firearms license.
Okay.
It's the license that you need to have approved by the ATF in order to deal firearms.
My guess is that's an extensive process. Is that correct?
Not at all.
Okay.
Surprisingly enough, yes. I went, full deep dive into it.
Yeah.
But it's more of an extensive part on their background, right? They're doing a lot of checks. Mm-hmm. They're doing a lot of audits. They're making sure that they're not issuing the license to somebody that has shown any potential capacity to not deserve it.
Right.
And then outside of that, it's mostly just learning the laws around what you can and can't do in delivering a firearm.
Interesting.
Right. It's very easy to click the sale button and take the credit card. It's when can I give them that? What are the wait periods? What are the background checks? Is it an NFA item? Is it not an NFA item? All of those things that generally roll. So it took about 3 months for the licensing, and you have to meet with the ATF for an actual in-person meeting.
Okay.
They go over all the forms with you to make sure that you are aware of all the forms that you need to fill out, all the records that you need to keep, and all the reports that you need to turn in. And then once you do that, then about a month or two later, they finish their investigation and they'll issue you your firearms license.
And then when you got that license, you could literally open up a store. Like
Correct.
You didn't need another thing to open up a store.
Yeah, and it's actually a catch-22 because in order to apply for your license, you have to have the place that you're going to be doing business.
Interesting.
So I actually had to rent space
And wait.
then apply and wait and pay rent and then get my license and then be able to start selling. Now, just the serialized firearms. Like as soon as I opened up the store, you can get signed up and start selling, accessories, magazines, and stuff like that, scopes, optics. But the actual serialized firearms part, you have to wait for that license.
Well, I guess it makes sense. Like, they want to know where you're going to operate, that's part of making sure you're legit, I would assume.
Yep. Yeah. They research, and that's what I didn't realize. The ATF is actually researching the space that you have and the laws and the zoning behind it, right? Mm-hmm. To make sure, because there are FFLs that operate out of residential houses. The ATF doesn't mind that, but they want to make sure that you're zoned properly and the county allows you to operate a business out of your residence, stuff like that. So that actually came up more than anything, was making sure that I was, in a proper zoning location. I had all the proper paperwork to start this business of selling firearms.
Does this apply to anybody that works for you too, or works with you? As far as in the store, do they have to have the same license or?
No, yeah. So it's an umbrella license.
Okay.
So anybody who works for me is then allowed to sell the fire. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it falls under that license.
Correct.
Okay. Excellent. So you end up getting the license. You have your location. What's the first gun you buy to sell? Do you remember?
The first gun, and it just happened to be timing, Mossberg was running a stocking dealer promotion where if you bought 4, you got 2 free. And so the Mossberg 940 stocking dealer package was the first thing that we picked up.
Did all this come pretty naturally to you, like with all of your experience, and then you had loan officer experience working with financials? Was it easy to open up your business? Was it hard? Like, what did you?
It was actually pretty hard because one thing that I found out, and another driving force behind me starting the store, was how lost I felt despite all of my knowledge. Because doing all of those classes and all those certificates and all those qualifications within the military, they still only teach you the 10 guns that the military has.
Right.
So then I would go into the civilian sector. I would go into academy or shooters or something like that. And there's just this giant wall of guns. And they just like go, what do you want? And I'm like, I don't know. I thought I knew, but apparently I don't know.
Right.
And I'm like, where do I start? What am I looking for? What is all of this? What is all of that? There's so many different manufacturers. There's so many different models. There's so many different styles of guns. That's what kind of drove me into. I was like, well, I want to create a space that people can come to the store and have a conversation and kind of build a plan,
right?
And get the advice, and not just be, what gun are you looking for? Here's one, here you go.
Kind of more of a concierge level
Correct.
of a store. So
Yes.
so that I'm really glad you brought that up. So that's kind of what you're marketing after. Hey, come to my store. Let's talk. I've got some things here. Let's look at it and let's see what fits to you.
Correct. Yeah, we basically like to sit down and start with a consultation and kind of find out, okay, what are you going to be doing with the firearm? And how are you going to be utilizing the firearm? That kind of then drives the conversation, because a lot of time people, is it for concealed carry? Is it for home defense? Is it for
shooting range?
Correct. Is it just a range toy that you want to practice with? Is it do you live in an apartment that share walls that bullets go through, right? That's a huge concern. Everybody goes, oh, what's the best gun to get for home defense? And the first thing I ask is, what's on the other side of the wall?
Right.
Even if it's not an apartment complex, my daughter's room is on the other side of the wall, right? So I don't want something that goes through drywall, because that's potentially pretty dangerous. Are we going to, be doing long range shooting? Are we going to be hunting? If we are hunting, what type of animal are we hunting? Is it deer? Is it bird? Is it coyote? Is it varmint? Is it, deer or, elk out in the Midwest? All of those change the dynamic of what it is that you should be looking for. So I like to have that conversation.
Well, that makes complete sense. And I imagine a lot of your clients are repeat clients and you get to know them and what they want, and they come back.
Yes.
It's not a one and done, I would think. Now let's talk about the laws a little bit, because you mentioned that. What are some common laws about gun ownership in Florida? We're in Florida right now.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is the laws are constantly changing.
Right.
And then so there's a lot of miscommunication. There's a lot of gun myths out there. And there's a lot of stuff that was true that's no longer true. So the big one with Florida just recently, Governor DeSantis signed that everyone is allowed to conceal carry as long as you can lawfully conceal carry.
What is concealed carry mean?
And that's a fantastic question that actually differentiates from state to state. And one thing is, I was a police officer in Virginia Beach, and so I learned Virginia Beach definition of concealed carry and their laws around concealed carry. And so whether you're concealed carrying in public, or you're concealed carrying in a car, or you concealed carrying in different types of grounds, whether you're going on to government grounds in a government building, if you're driving on base.
But concealed, does concealed mean you're covering it up? Is that what that means? Yes,
concealed generally means that it's not observable to the public, to the general public. And in Virginia Beach, that I can access the firearm within one motion, right? So if it is in a glove box, it would not be concealed carrying, because I have to open the glove box in order to retrieve the firearm.
Okay.
But if it is in a holster on me, on my persons, or under my seat, it then would be concealed carry, because I can access the firearm in one motion.
Okay. So going back to Florida, so DeSantis opened it up where you didn't have to have a license for concealed carry.
Correct. He said you don't have to have a license in order to conceal carry, but there are still some reasons why you'd want to go ahead and take the class and get your concealed carry license. The first and foremost, as it relates to my business, is there's a 3-day wait period in Florida if you're purchasing a pistol. If you don't have your concealed carry. If you have your concealed carry, you can take it same day. So you'd be able to bypass that waiting period if you go ahead and get your concealed carry. Another thought is reciprocity. Other states recognize Florida's concealed carry license, and so you can conceal carry in those other states. If you're just utilizing Florida's concealed carry allowance, you can conceal carry here, but if you drive right across the border to Georgia, you cannot. If you get your concealed carry in Florida, Georgia recognizes it, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. So you could actually drive up the East Coast and conceal carry legally the entire time, and then you would have to stop and no longer conceal carry because Maryland does not, right? And so you need to know those laws as you travel with the firearm.
That is super interesting. A question just came up to my mind. Obviously, you're a police officer. Like if you got stopped for speeding, okay, and you have one in your glove box, like what is the proper thing to do? You say, officer, want to let you know I have a gun in the glove box. Is that the proper thing to do, or you just don't say anything?
Yeah, generally, the way I teach or I talk to friends and family about for any traffic stop, whether you do or don't, it all applies, whether you have a firearm in the car or not, it all applies. But generally, when the officer stops you, I want to have my license, registration ready to go in my hand. And then I'm generally going to put both of my hands up on the steering wheel in plain view of the officer, right? That's going to disarm and make the officer feel safe. As soon as they walk up, they're going to see that you already have your window down, you have your license and registration, you have your hands on the wheel, and that you're prepared for the traffic stop. So I don't, it lets me know that you're being upfront and honest, which is going to put me at ease as an officer, right? The last thing that we want as we're walking up to a car is somebody digging around in the car and they're bent over and I can't see what they're doing and I can't see what they're grabbing and I can't see what they're getting at. And now I have to play guess and catch up as you come popping up with your license because you found it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So avoid sudden movements. But yes, I would have both my hands on the steering wheel. And as soon as the officer has to announce who they are, their jurisdiction, and the reason for the stop. As soon as they do that, I'm Officer Bobola with the Virginia Beach Police Department. I pulled you over for speeding, license and registration. I'd say, hey, just so you know, I'm a concealed carry, member. My firearm is on my waist, or my firearm is in the glove, or my firearm is wherever. From there, I would, obviously seek legal advice with any of my comments here. I am not a licensed attorney or lawyer.
Well, I'm just speaking in general.
Correct.
Like, I think that would be a common question for amateurs like me, like that have one in their car. And like everybody gets pulled over at some point in their life. Like,
correct.
It's just courtesy to the police officer.
Yeah, I would always announce to the officer that I have my firearm and where my firearm is at, and then just wait for direction from the officer. The officer may want you to step out. He may want you to leave the firearm alone. If it's in the glove box and your registration's in the glove box, he may say, that's okay. I'm not going to check, or I'll check your registration on my computer. Right. So just don't go in the glove box and we won't have a problem. Again, by you announcing it and telling me as the police officer, I know that it's probably very unlikely that you're going to do me harm. Right. Because you're not going to give me the heads up that you have the gun, right? It's not the gun that I know about that I'm necessarily worried. It's the gun that I don't know about.
Sure. Now, when you sell a gun to somebody, are you running a background check on everybody?
Yep.
So that releases you from liability, essentially. You've run the background check. Like I guess what I'm asking, like, if you have somebody come in and like, man, this guy is weird, there's something strange here, do you refrain? Like, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a very touchy subject because it's very easy to start getting into discrimination, not being able to articulate why you sold that person a gun, didn't sell that person a gun, or what it is that you feel. One thing that's a strong no-no is if they have the odor of marijuana, right? They're going to fill out a 4473, which is the firearm questionnaire, and it's going to ask them, are you the purchaser of the firearm? Are you buying this to sell it to anybody? Do you use narcotics? Stuff like that. And so it asks them if they use narcotics, including marijuana. If they have an odor of marijuana, then even if they have a medical marijuana license, as of right now, you cannot purchase a firearm. Now, Trump did downgrade it from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3, so we are awaiting potential revamp of ATF guidelines on that, but nothing officially. So if I do smell marijuana or I see your medical marijuana card, I cannot sell you the firearm, because that, in the federal government's eyes, even though it's legal in whatever state that you're in, is still a scheduled substance.
So you're putting a lot of thought into the daily operation of selling. What are the laws? Am I following it? A big responsibility.
Correct.
Let's talk about some general safety, because I think that's what most people want to know too. Like, how do you generally recommend somebody store a firearm at their home if they have kids, things along that line?
Yeah, the big thing for me in growing up, it's something that you learn in the police department as well, is if your child gets a hold of a firearm in your house and there is any type of accident, you are going to be held responsible. You are going to go to jail, right? So I am a very big proponent of making sure that all of my firearms in my house are unloaded. All of my firearms are in a safe locked. I actually have multiple safes to prevent any type of. I have a lot of guns, so but I have multiple safes. All of them are completely empty except for the one firearm that's in a safe near my bed that's ready to go in case of an emergency, and my concealed carry that I'm taking in and out. But when I come home, as soon as I come home, the concealed carry is unloaded and put up in a safe space, and then the one firearm that is loaded is in a quick deploy lockbox near my bed.
Right.
So I make sure that even if a child were to get a hold of one of my firearms, it's unloaded. And then inside of that, they would have to go to another place to get a magazine, and then they'd have to go to another place to get ammo, and then they'd have to put all three together in order for an accident to happen.
Well, I know when we were talking before, when you did some training for us, about how you've really educated your kids at a young age, which to me, I think is so important because, number one, it eliminates the fear, but creates responsibility too. Right?
Yeah, and it also helps eliminate the excitement, right? A lot of times, especially with kids, right? If you have something that's taboo that you tell them, no, you're not allowed to touch, well, it's the first thing they want to do. They want to go touch it and play with it, right? Because it's taboo, right? I remove that right out of the gate. So both of my my daughters, from 6 years old, 4 years old, they clean all of my firearms with me. So when I go to the range, literally my daughters will see me getting my bag ready and they'll go, "You're going to the range?" And I go, "Yeah, I'm going to the range." They're like, "So we're cleaning guns tonight?" And I go, "Yeah, we're cleaning guns tonight." Awesome. And I got gloves, little doctor gloves for them. And so they get excited because they get to go get their gloves on. Yeah. And I disassemble a firearm. I make sure there's no live ammunition whenever I'm cleaning firearms. Again, all of the live ammunition is in a separate place in my house anyways. But there's no live ammunition. I disassemble the firearm. I clean all of my firearms with a toothbrush. You don't need anything fancy or crazy. And I give them the toothbrush and the part, and they sit there and brush with their little gloves on, and they clean the firearms stuff. And then I finish. Once they get bored, they go off and play. But yeah, it removes all of the taboo and excitement.
And creates some confidence and all of that. I love that.
Yeah.
How long has it been since you opened your doors?
We've been open for June will be 2 years.
Very nice.
We're coming up on our 2-year mark, and really just kind of learning the business. We didn't want to get too crazy. I know a lot of people, they see the Instagram stories of the successes and the people who have made it and did all of this. And that's not really how business generally goes.
For sure.
And you don't have these huge leaps where you open your doors and then the next thing you do doing $400 million in revenue and money's raining. So we wanted to keep our expenses as small as possible and just kind of learn steadily as we go. And we're learning different facets of the gun industry, whether it's Cerakoting, whether it's laser engraving, whether it's stippling grips, customization, suppressors, NFA items, what are the margins, who am I competing with? And we're just kind of wading our way through it to see exactly what our niche is going to be.
If you had advice for somebody out there that was thinking about opening up a gun store, what would you say?
Honestly, it would be lean more towards customization than new guns. There's very, very little margin in new gun sales because the manufacturers and distributors control so much of it, right? Glock is not going to sell you one of their guns for $100 and let you sell it for $600. Right. So there's very few margin, and with the internet and big suppliers that do get good margins, a lot of them end up cutting it down. A lot of people are surprised to find out that literally the price that I'm buying a gun for is about the same price that they can find online at some, budsguns.com /whatever. There's some special, there's some sale between one of the, different companies that they can often find a gun cheaper than I can buy the gun. So I would tell them to lean more towards customization.
Very nice. Well, I mean, that's served you well in your mortgage business too. It's kind of a golden rule of business, I think, is really figure out your niche. And you found it with the military customization. I'm assuming a lot of your clients kind of came from your background. And then also the realtor community, the loan officer, all of that's kind of a built-in business.
Yeah, at this point, I've learned a lot about kind of networking and finding people that you enjoy hanging out with. You know, when I left the military, I lost a lot of camaraderie.
Yep.
And then I found that in the police department, and then I lost it again when I got out into mortgages. And so you've got to try and find people that connect with you. And I think that's really a lost art, you know, just having general conversations with people and finding people to connect outside of the internet and social media. You know, me and my wife are on a bowling league and we bowl, and I've started doing gun competitions to meet other gun people. Yeah. And we go to church and you meet people at church. And like just that entire community feel has been so disconnected, I think, over the last couple of years, with everybody just basically going to work and then going to home and being on their device. It's amazing how many times, especially in the real estate world, we talked about you have to get out and get to know people and meet people and shake hands and stuff. And it's such an obscure lost art with today's you know, youth.
What do you like best or better, being a loan officer or a gun store owner?
I would say the guns are more fun because it's my passion, but the mortgages are easier and more profitable. So right now they both you know, one hand's shaking the other.
Yeah,
so we'll see if I have to pivot, you know, somewhere in the future from there. I think the upside of the gun store is a lot higher than the upside of the mortgage store. And it's a lot more fun. If I can get into a space where I'm doing about the same as mortgages, I may make the transition. But mortgages, I'm a nerd when it comes to math. And mortgages are a lot of fun as well. The math of just kind of breaking down the numbers and then looking at, you know, potential investments. I'm a huge nerd when it comes to anything financial as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, this has been a great discussion. I mean, what a resume you've built in a short period of time. You know, military veteran, military police, real police, civilian police, loan officer, now gun store owner, and now it seems to be, and dad, we won't want to forget that. And it all seems to be meshing together really well. So congratulations on that. I know a lot of people are going to really enjoy hearing this because guns are one of those subjects that I think a lot of people want to know more about and maybe not fully admit they want to know about it and probably a little nervous about it. So go see CJ over at Anchored Armory. I love the concierge idea because if you're thinking about gun ownership or you're really an enthusiast, that's who you like to talk to and educate.
Yeah.
It's been fun. Thank
you so much.
Yeah. The Hometown Jacks podcast is recorded and produced by First Coast Mortgage Funding, located in the heart of Jacksonville. Do you want to be our next guest? Visit our website at hometownjackspodcast.com. We can't wait to hear your story.